A health savings account is a powerful tool to help you save on taxes when paying for health care expenses. What you might not know is that there is a hidden feature in the health savings account that will help you grow your wealth substantially. Hello, neighbors, and welcome to episode 14 of the Neighborhood Money Podcast, a video podcast here to help you grow your financial knowledge and build a life you deserve. It is officially the 1st of November, and we are very excited to be back here in the Neighborhood Studios to really have a timely conversation all about health savings account. I know it's the beginning or the middle of benefit season for most of you, so hopefully this conversation will help you and aid you in making those healthcare decisions.
Yeah, I'm hoping this one will be a little bit beneficial to people during this benefit plan period, because I know a few episodes back we did hint at doing an HSA episode, but now it seemed like the right time to go through these HSAs, and I think it is also a great time to go through these HSAs.
Drew, I'm really fired up because not only do we have in store what the HSA can be used for from a healthcare expense standpoint, but we also have an additional strategy that our neighbor here can use to help them grow their wealth. And not a lot of people know about this feature of the HSA. So I'm fired up to dive into it and really get going.
Yeah, so let's just start off with one of our neighborhood reviews, or what did you call it earlier? The neighborhood
community comment.
Community comment. That's what it was. Perfect. Yeah, so let's read off this first community comment, and it was, "Love the vids, keep up the great work." And that was from Alec on YouTube. And I might potentially know which Alec that is. So if you're listening, appreciate listening, and I'm sure I'll be seeing you soon.
Definitely appreciate the comment over on our YouTube channel and the support there. Drew, I know there's stuff going on in your house. You want to give the listeners here a little heads up?
Yeah, so if you are hearing any type of background noise of pounding or banging or electric saws, we do have the plumber here today, so he's working a little bit on getting our water and our heat on, because we haven't had heat for a couple months now.
At least you get it on before the winter hits.
Yeah, a couple of these days, maybe the heat would have been on, but this is also that time of year where you're almost fighting it, where you're saying, I'm waiting till the last moment possible to actually turn on my utilities for heat.
For sure.
So just a heads up, everybody, if you hear anything in the background, it is the house being still worked on. It's getting very close to the end, and I'm thinking this may be my last week in this type of location for the video podcast. So this curtain won't be behind me anymore.
Yeah, so if you want to check out Drew's new setup next week or the following week, head over to YouTube and check out our YouTube channel.
Absolutely.
So one more thing we wanted to add to the podcast on a weekly basis is a little trivia for you guys. And we're really going to have 2 questions, 2 this week. One primarily focused on trivia around the topic of the episode, and then 2, a more so a random trivia question, probably revolved around the date that the episode will be released. So our 2 trivia questions for this week are: number 1, what % of people invest the money that is inside of their health savings account or HSA accounts? And then the second question we have for you is, on this date, November 1st, so the date that this podcast is releasing, in 1997, James Cameron's Titanic had its first public screening. In what country did this premiere take place? If you want to know the answers to those trivia questions, stick around to the end of the episode and we'll definitely let you know what they are.
Cav, are you a big trivia guy? Do you like going to the restaurants or places like that have those trivia games?
You know, I'm not really that big of a trivia guy in that sense, but I do listen to different podcasts that I really have enjoyed their trivias there.
I have got an embarrassing trivia one. We were at a restaurant and I was at a table of buddies, and we decided to play the restaurant trivia. So the whole restaurant's playing against it. There's a big video board up on the wall, and it got to this bonus question one where if you got it, you got double the points, but if you didn't get it, you lost like 2 or 3 times the points. And it was like,
okay,
what was the most sang song in the world, or like the US? And I don't know what came over me, but I said Johnny Be Good. And I was like, really, really confident in it. I don't know why. And so we went with it, and it ended up being Happy Birthday was the right answer. So I have no idea why I said Johnny Be Good, thinking it was like the most sang song ever.
You let the whole team down on that one,
but
Drew.
They're like, wow, you're pretty confident in it. I almost feel like it was because there was something I saw where they played that song into like space or something, hoping to get contact back. I don't know. I could be making all this up, but I was very confident in the answer, and it was very much not the answer.
Well, confidence is half the battle, but maybe not when you're doing
For the
trivia.
double points.
Right. All right, Drew, let's dive into the episode. So, a health savings account, many of you might have heard of this or you see this on your benefits package during open enrollment season or when you're starting that new job. But, Drew, what exactly is an health savings account or an HSA?
Yeah, I'd say in simple terms, it's a separate account from your health plan. It makes it seem like it is connected, but it is a separate account it's has a custodian that's taking care of your administration fees and making sure everything's compliant. But it's a tax advantage savings account plan that is focused on health related expenses.
It's that separate account that you can then fund those healthcare costs with. And there's certain rules around how much you can actually put into
Hmm.
a health savings account depending on if you're an individual and your family. And those rules are really for an individual, you can contribute up to 3,650 into your
Yep.
HSA, and as a family is actually $7,300 on an annual basis.
And these are similar to other investment vehicles that we've talked about, where these numbers we're telling you are the current numbers. They tend to
Yep.
change every year on almost a inflationary wave.
Typically, if you have an HSA through an employer, they may or may not offer some sort of HSA contribution. So let's just say your employer offers you
Hmm.
$1,000 into your HSA.
Yep.
That, in addition to the amount of money you put in, cannot exceed these limits.
Yeah. So the combined total with your employer contribution and your contribution cannot exceed, if you're a single person, $3,650.
We talked about like
Hmm.
401ks, individual retirement accounts, and there's income limits for those. And it really might limit the amount you can either put in or you might not qualify at all. Are there income limits for an HSA?
There's not necessarily these income limits because it tends to be an employer sponsored plan or account, I should say. But with those thresholds on how much you can contribute, that's where your limits end up being, is just what the contribution limit is under the tax codes.
So, regardless of how much money you actually make, you can still contribute to your health savings account.
Yep.
You made a comment, Drew, that it's through your employer, but you can also go out into the individual market and get
Yeah.
a plan that offers a health savings account with it.
Yeah, you can. So if you aren't having or you do have health insurance privately, there are ways to get your accounts to have that HSA added to it. But on the broader theme of what an HSA is, I would say the majority of people with an HSA, it is an employer sponsored type of plan.
Absolutely. And Drew, one of the things I like the most about health savings account and the reason why they're so powerful
Hmm.
and growing in popularity is because of the triple tax advantage that these accounts offer. So when I say a triple tax
Hmm.
advantage, there's really three main points here of taking tax breaks. So one, you get to put in pre-tax
Yep.
contributions. So this is very similar to like your traditional 401k, your individual retirement account, where putting in pre-tax contributions is going to decrease your
Taxable income.
current taxes in the year.
Hmm.
It's also going to defer those taxes. So that's number two is tax deferred growth. As you put money into the HSA, if you choose to build it up and invest within the
Hmm.
account, it will actually grow tax deferred.
Yep.
And now the third option here for the triple tax advantage is tax-free withdrawals. You get to put in
Hmm.
tax-free contributions. It grows
Tax free. Yep.
tax-free, and then you can withdraw
Yeah.
tax-free for qualified medical expenses. And I don't
Yep.
know, of a more powerful investment vehicle that you can
Yeah, and when
find.
we're talking these qualified medical expenses, it's not only if you're getting injured and you have a health bill, but it's also things of, I would say, for example, Jordan and I, we got that Theragun that we've talked about, and that was under that pre-tax dollars, growing pre-tax, and we got to withdraw it tax-free to pay for a Theragun, which you think isn't really a medical expense, but they consider it one because it's something that helps. It's like a preventative type of health instrument.
And the list of things that fall under the
Mhm.
qualified medical expenses is pretty
Pretty
vast
broad.
and it continues to grow on a year by year basis. So if you are interested to know what specifically falls under these qualified medical expenses, just go out to the IRS website and look up qualified medical expenses under an
Yeah.
HSA.
And you can even talk to your primary doctor and they can let you know what's borderline and they can even sign off on some of these.
So, another really cool feature about a health savings account is that when you fund this account, you can actually roll over any leftover money year over year and also
hmm
employer to employer.
Yeah, the rollover feature and the employer feature, I think, are probably some of the best outside of tax reasons and some type of investment options. But these rolling over from employer to employer is huge because a lot of other plans they have things called a flexible savings account or an FSA, and those tend to have a yearly cap. And if you don't use it, you lose it. And if you move from employer to employer, you also lose it. Having that contributions that you added and even if your employer adds them, which would even be a more benefit, it's pretty much free money if your employer gives it to you. And then you can go to work for somebody else and that money still comes with you. It doesn't go back to the company that gave it to you. And then even if you wanted to self fund it yourself, you don't have to worry about losing it in that money.
And that's so powerful compared to the FSA, is that it is your money and it will continue to be your money. How does someone actually qualify for a health savings account?
To make it easy, when we're saying it's employer sponsored, it should just be a box that you can check of saying if they offer this plan or they offer this plan with an HSA, but they tend to be on a high deductible health plan. So the first 100% that you have to pay out of your pocket ends up being a little bit higher, but then your monthly premiums tend to be a little bit lower, which ends up coming out of your paycheck. And those are the plans that these HSAs work with.
These plans are really good for people that don't have a lot of medical expenses and don't frequent the doctor.
hmm
So, like Drew said, you do have higher deductible under these health plans.
Yeah.
If you see a HDHP, that stands for a high deductible health
hmm
plan, which you have to have an HSA,
Yeah.
but you will have that higher deductible. So you will have more money coming out of your pocket for medical expenses. But the big benefit outside of just the HSA is that you're going to have a lot lower premiums on a monthly basis.
Yeah.
And so you have that high deductible health plan, couple that with the HSA, where you can really take advantage of tax breaks and also investing within your HSA, which we'll get into here in a little
Yeah.
bit. But it's a pretty powerful combination.
Yeah, and with these plans, it seems to be everybody has their own opinion on how they like their health plan to be. If you're somebody that's frequently going to the doctor, you probably don't like a high deductible plan. But if you're
Right.
somebody that's not frequent at the doctor, you like a high deductible plan because that means the amount coming out of your paycheck on a month to month or week to week basis ends up being cheaper. So in that whole year that you have your plan, it may end up being cheaper because you're not going to the doctor. But like I said, if you're somebody that does go to the doctor a lot, there's a lot of money coming out of your pocket that's going towards that deductible and then whatever the co-insurance after that is.
When you have an
Mhm.
HSA, there are a couple of strategies that you can use to help pay for those medical expenses. One is very common and one you might not have heard about before, and you probably haven't. But Drew, when we think about an HSA, what is that most common strategy in using it?
The most common strategy is you're putting money into your HSA as this separate savings account that's going directly for your medical expenses. It tends to be not for all those other qualified expenses of like random items. So the big part of it is so if you do have that high deductible plan, say it's $6,000, you maxed out your health savings account and it's pretty much saying that you know you have money set aside for something catastrophic when you're going to the hospital. It doesn't, I guess, have to be
Mhm.
catastrophic either. It can be even small, minor items. So the
Right.
basic strategy is you're just forcefully putting money. Well, I guess it's not even forcefully.
It's up to you. You have the flexibility to fund your
Yeah, so
HSA.
I guess I would more or less say it's a way for you to have a deduction taken out of your paycheck. So it's kind of out of sight, out of mind. It's a separate savings account that you can draw from for these unforeseen health expenses.
And even the more typical expenses too, right? Like you were saying, like you can go out and buy, your over the counter
hmm
medications with them, bandages, etc. Just going to the doctor. If you potentially have a prescription, you can pay out of your HSA with that. So it's really just funding whatever medical expenses you have. in
Yeah.
any given
So,
year.
yeah, so currently I'm on my wife's health insurance plan. She's a nurse and she has an HSA plan. Went over it when we decided to switch to her plan. I said the HSA tend to be a better plan just because if she were to go from employer to employer, she could take it with her. She didn't opt for maxing the contribution out for the year. So what we did is during this pregnancy, we used a strategy of cutting down the retirement to not zero, but to a smaller
Hmm.
percentage than we were at before. And that was a couple months ago. And then what we thought is the money that would be going into the 401k or retirement plan will be going into her HSA plan. And this will cover the majority of this deductible that we will be having for this kid in this upcoming year. Actually, probably by the time this aired, the baby might be out. So that was one of the strategies of we just wanted that pre-tax dollars to be able to withdraw tax free to be putting towards these medical expenses on a short-term year basis. Maybe the taxes aren't huge that you're going to be saving on it, but
Hmm.
every little dollar counts in my book.
So I know we talked about the three tax advantage, so really the triple threat,
Mm-hmm.
and this typical healthcare strategy really hits two of them. So it hits the pre-tax contributions and then the tax-free withdrawals for medical expenses. And because you're using it in such a short period of time, you're really not growing this money. And that really brings us to the next strategy, one that I get pretty fired up
Mm-hmm.
about, and it's really thinking about your HSA as a bonus retirement
Mm-hmm.
account, or in other words, the fund and hold strategy. There's some, nuances to it, but it's super powerful.
I have to say that I have not heard about this strategy before. And since we've been going through it and getting prepped for this episode, it has been on my mind quite a bit of how cool of a strategy I personally believe it is.
First thing I want to call out before we dive into the fund and hold strategy is, did you know that on average for a 65-year-old couple, they're going to spend almost $400,000 in medical expenses from 65 until, or for the rest of their life, essentially.
Whoa.
This strategy not only helps you build wealth, but it also can help you cover those medical expenses down the line. Two big points that need to be made up front too is that this does require you to have some extra cash
Mm-hmm.
flow in your budget. And then you also will have to be very detailed in this process around your documentation. Here's exactly what this strategy is. So, like we were talking about with your typical healthcare strategy, you fund your HSA, and then when you have medical expenses, you pull from that to pay for those. And that's where you get two of the three tax breaks. Well, in this strategy, you fund your HSA
Yep.
each and every year, max out your HSA. And when those medical expenses come up, you don't pull from your HSA, but you pay out of pocket.
So it's not coming from your HSA account, it's actually coming from your bank account that you pay majority of your bills with.
Absolutely. So you're paying with post tax
Mm-hmm.
dollars for these medical expenses. HSAs allow you to invest the funds into, say, the stock
Mm-hmm.
market. Not only are these pre tax contributions going in, now you're invested very similar to like a
Yeah.
401k, and you're going to let this money
Yeah,
grow.
so you can invest into limited investment vehicles through this HSA.
Where the real power comes in is if you can fund these medical expenses on an annual
Mhm.
basis out of pocket and build up this
Mhm.
HSA, that's going to grow to be pretty sizable down the
Yeah.
line. And here's one more thing you need to know is that not only is this HSA account growing, but when you are paying these medical expenses on a year by year basis, as long as you keep detailed documentation of each medical expense, all of these expenses, as long as they happened after you set up the HSA
Mhm.
account, are refundable from your
There's
HSA.
no expiration date on these bills is what you're saying. So it could be 20, 30, 40 years down the road. If you have these receipts, they can be refunded.
Take 10 years down the
Mhm.
line, you fund your HSA, you let it grow in the market,
Mhm.
and then you have this detailed documentation. And so at year 10, you can say, hey, I'm going to pay myself out of my HSA for all of these medical expenses. That's where you get the triple tax advantage. You get the pre-tax
Mhm.
contributions, you got that tax deferred growth. And now that you're pulling for qualified medical expenses, you get tax-free withdrawals.
As a big lump sum or just as you send in your receipts, right?
But yeah, as you want to pull out any of those qualified expenses, you can pull that money directly from your
And
HSA.
what happens if you have an excess of money in this HSA plan after you've already pulled out your qualified medical expenses?
Well, Drew, that's where it's really cool. So let's just say for some round
Mhm.
numbers, your HSA grows to, let's say, $100,000 after 15 years. And let's just say over the course of that time, you had $75,000 of medical
Okay.
expenses. Well, now you have $25,000 of or of excess money in your HSA after pulling
Yep.
out. That just sits there and can continue to grow over time. When you get to 65 years
Mhm.
old, you can actually use this now as a retirement account, very similar to a traditional 401k. Pre-tax
Yep.
contributions grow tax-free, and then once you hit 65, you can pull that money out without penalty. You will have to pay income
Yep.
taxes, but you did get those tax benefits.
And that's pretty amazing that this strategy, when you're looking at it long term, is getting these distributions later on in life tax free, which are huge, and anything excess that's still growing at the market rate can be taken out as same as it was a traditional 401k or a traditional IRA, and you just pay
Mhm.
taxes on it. So you can just keep those withdrawals small, or you talk with your financial advisor, and you can really make this work for you as a investment vehicle, not only a savings account for medical expenses.
And one more thing that makes this really powerful too. I know I mentioned how an average 65-year-old couple will have 390,000, almost $400,000 in medical expenses for the remainder of their life. You can use this HSA for those medical expenses and you'll get those tax-free withdrawals. So what you're essentially doing is through your HSA, you are funding or setting aside a portion of your retirement funds towards future medical expenses, taking advantage of that triple tax advantage.
Pretty amazing strategy, if you ask me.
So let's walk through an example, throw some numbers here so to hopefully show the neighbors how powerful this strategy can actually be. Let's just take two different people. Let's call them, I don't know, Mark and Molly. And each person funds their HSA or maxes out their HSA for the annual contributions of $3,650.
Hmm.
Yes, I know we're not accounting for inflation here in the
Yep.
example, but just bear with us because it still provides a good representation of how powerful this
Yeah,
can be.
powerful visualization for sure.
Let's say that each person also incurs the same amount of medical expenses each, which equals the amount that they put into their HSA each and every year of the
Hmm.
$3,650 of medical expenses. So each person puts in and maxes out their
Yep.
HSA, and each person incurs the same amount of money in medical expenses.
Yep.
After 10 years, the amount of medical expenses that Mark and Molly both accrued was $36,500. Mark, each and every year, funded his account, but then took that money out to pay for those annual medical expenses. So Mark, at the end of 10 years, had paid that $36,500 of medical
Hmm.
expenses, but had $0 in his HSA. Now, Molly did the fund and hold strategy where she put in the max amount of dollars into her HSA, but then paid cash for those medical
Hmm.
expenses on a year by year basis. Fast forward 10 years, Molly now has, assuming a somewhat conservative 8%
Hmm.
return, Molly has a little over $57,000 in her HSA account. Now, if you remember, I said the total amount of medical expenses they had incurred each was 36,500.
Hmm.
So that's a difference of just shy of $21,000 Molly has in her HSA after getting the refund of her medical expenses over the course of that 10-year period.
She's netting right now, after this 10 years, of an extra about $21,000 compared to the counterpart, Mark, that has $0 left in the HSA.
Yeah, isn't that just super powerful? Again, assuming you can do this on a year by year basis, you have the cash flow to do
Yep.
that. Molly now has this $21,000 that's just going to continue to grow over time. I actually looked at, okay, well, what happens if someone did this over the course of their entire working
Mhm.
career? So on average, people work about 42 years. Let's just assume the same HSA max contribution of
Mhm.
$3,650. Let's assume that that same amount of money is incurred from a medical expense each and every year. And so if over the course of 42 years, assuming an 8% return rate, if you pay out of pocket for these medical expenses and max fund your HSA, you would have over $1 million after taking refunds for those medical expenses in an HSA when you retire.
Whoa. And just alone of that, so say that Molly in this example of having that, just that lump sum of that $57,000. And she was detailed about all these expenses and she was able to afford this in the front end of it. And it's almost as if it can be almost a part of a separate type of emergency fund where if later on in life as family comes along and kids and something crazy, whether it be something with the house or be something with your kid or be something with your vehicle, you could potentially find these receipts and then get a lump sum of money to cover these extraordinary costs.
The possibilities are really
Hmm.
endless because there's really no time limit on when you have to take this money
Hmm.
out. So like a traditional retirement account, you have to wait till about the 59 and a
Yeah,
half. There's really no limit to that. You can pull it out whenever you want, as long as you have the right documentation so you don't get taxed on it.
that's amazing.
So it's really powerful, the fund and hold strategy or the bonus retirement account, as you think about your total financial picture, something that you should consider if you do want to go down this route. We are not financial
No.
advisors. This podcast is really just for informational purposes
Yep.
only. And so if you want to go down this route, definitely reach out to your financial advisor and start asking these questions and see how these strategies can help you
Yeah.
start growing
And
your
I would
wealth.
also say don't be afraid to go into your HR department or your benefits provider and really ask if your plan is HSA available or if it's not, or if there's any way you could get onto one. And if you have that investment option, if they have some custodial or custodian set up aside to be able to take care of that investment portion of this HSA plan.
So if you made it this far in the episode, we both want to say thank you and thank you for supporting the Neighborhood Money Podcast. If you wanted to continue support this podcast, if you're listening to the audio version of it, please go out to
Yep.
whatever app store you are listening on, whether it's Apple, Google, or Spotify, and provide a written review and rate the podcast, as that really helps us grow this platform and
Yep.
provides very valuable feedback to us. If you're listening and watching over on our YouTube
Hmm.
channel, let us know in the comments below what are some future topics that you want to know about. Also, if you like this episode and this video, please like the video and subscribe to our channel so
Yeah.
that you are notified of any future videos that we put
With
out
that
there.
said, if you are listening on the audio file, I have been shaking my head and smiling and put my thumbs up, which you'd be able to see over at the YouTube channel if you wanted to. Sometimes I forget that they're with the audio file, they can actually see me on this video.
Very good point. So, Drew, HSAs, there's a lot of different ways you can use this in your financial
Hmm.
strategy, whether it's paying for those medical expenses on an annual basis or helping you build wealth in the long term. What would you say some of your key takeaways are from this conversation?
One of my key takeaways is I don't know if it was part of this conversation per se, but it, in a way is. And we've talked about it in previous episodes, and I am a big procrastinator myself. But these HSA plans, because you're not forced to put money into them, and if your employer doesn't contribute to them, really make it a point to look at your plan this benefit season and see if you do qualify for this HSA. And if you do, really make an effort to, contribute to this HSA. I think whether you want to do a fund and grow or you want to use it to cover medical expenses, I think it's a great tool to let you put money aside without really thinking about it. And I think that point I'm trying to make here is really make a point of it to look at your plan and see if you do have this. And if you qualify, get off your butt and just set it up and start getting working on your HSA plan.
We both know that it can be a very time consuming and frustrating process for a lot of people when you're looking at benefits.
Mhm.
But it is very important to look at these plans and see how it fits into your financial picture and start asking those questions. And like Drew said, just get after it. And if it works for you, set it up and be consistent in your contributions. I think my main takeaway of an HSA in general is very similar to yours, Drew, is figure out if it fits into your picture, but more importantly, see if the HSA fund and hold strategy is something that can really benefit you in the long term. Can you create some extra cash flow
Mhm.
in your budget to be able to pay medical expenses out of pocket so that you can grow your HSA account 10, 15, 20 years down the line to one, help pay for those future medical
Mhm.
expenses, but then two, to have that bonus retirement account at your disposal to really grow and create more wealth for you and your loved ones.
Absolutely, that's a great takeaway there. It seems like there's been a big theme throughout all these episodes that there's not a one size fits all for any of these investment options, financial options, just any options. Really, it's really a unique person to person basis, situational by situational basis that it is something you have to sit down and look at and be able to plan and see if it does work for you or if it does not work for you.
So let's head out back over to our trivia question. So the first trivia question was, what percent of people invest the money that is inside of their health savings accounts? Drew, got any guesses?
Well, if it's for investment purposes on the HSA, I know I didn't do that in the past. I know we haven't done that with Jordan now. And a lot of people I talk to don't do it, so it can't be a high number. So I can say that for sure. So I'm thinking maybe somewhere under the 20% range.
Drum roll, please. 6% of accounts, that is 1.7 million accounts, that represents 6% of all accounts invest their money within an HSA.
Whoa. Yeah, I mean, I knew it was going to be somewhere in the low numbers. I was just giving more benefit than the doubt, I guess, because there's so many other areas in the world, and some people probably push it more in maybe a more corporate setting, or I don't know what. So I was maybe getting the benefit of the doubt there, but I did know it was going to be a small number.
All right, question number 2. So on this date, November 1st in 1997, James Cameron's Titanic had its first public screening. Drew, any idea what country that premiere took place in?
America?
No, it was taking place in Tokyo, Japan at the Tokyo International Film Festival.
Oh, I wonder why it was premiered there instead of in the US or something. That's strange, but there you go. We got
Hey,
trivia.
man, I'm not really into pop culture or entertainment like that. I'm more into just learning about personal finance.
All I
So
have
that's
to
a question
I
beyond me.
guess all I have to say is Johnny be good.
All right, so that almost wraps up our episode. Before we sign off, Drew, what the heck's been going on in the last week in your neighborhood?
It seems to be a recurring what's happening in the neighborhood until this thing finishes up, but we got the remodel going on again. As I said earlier today, if you heard any banging in the background, we got the plumber here today. It's really, really close to being finished here. We have some crown molding we're putting up. We're finishing up on some plumbing. Countertops are going to be coming in hopefully the next 2 weeks. Probably going to be after the baby, unfortunately. Then a little bit of backsplash, and we should be pretty good. But there is a kind of funny little joke in here. Is yesterday we had the electrician here. He finished everything up. It was awesome. I'm glad he was able to make it in here. And what Jordan's dad, he's been doing the work for us. He needed to find a tool. And there's some people that will call it caulk or cock. So he goes, "Hey, where's my tool?" And Jordan says, "Oh, it's over by the painter's cock." And our electrician goes, "I don't see any painter in here." Let that one sink in. I thought it was hilarious. It took Jordan a couple seconds to figure it out, but I was laughing my butt off. But anyways, what's happening in your neighborhood?
We have been just living up the Halloween theme here the last couple of weeks. Actually, one thing that I wasn't even aware of until most recently is we received our first boo bag.
Boo bag. What's that?
It is a bag full of little toys, candy, and whatnot for children. But the idea is you bring this bag with a card that says you've been booed
Mm-hmm.
and gives you a detailed instruction of what to do next. And then it also provides you with something to hang on your door that says we've been booed. But you bring it to a neighbor and then basically they get this boo bag and then it says for them to boo to other people. And so it's kind of a way to spread Halloween cheer. Is that even a thing? I'm not really sure. But it's a way to, get more involved into Halloween. And it's a lot of fun for children. We have a 2.5-year-old who loved opening up the boo bag and seeing all the good little knickknack toys, as well as all the candy and yummies that were
That's
included in
kind of
it.
a neat idea, especially get your kids involved with it. And then, if you wanted to get to know your neighbors a little bit better or have a little bit more sense of community or connect with some
Right.
other friends, I think that's pretty neat idea. I haven't done that. I don't know if I will do it this year, but maybe next year.
Yeah, it was pretty cool too. Cause then you go to the store. We went to Target to find things to put in our boo bag that we were going to give out. And our toddler was really into picking out the different things. So it was all around a really
Awesome.
fun experience.
Do you know who boos you? Does it say who?
We do, because we have a Ring camera, so we can actually see
Oh,
who the family
but
was.
if they didn't, you wouldn't know.
Yeah, exactly. So that's kinda how it used to be. You would never
Oh,
know who actually booed you, but because we have the Ring camera, we do know, but it's still fun regardless.
yeah, still fun. I guess they're not quite as much as the get to know your neighbors part of it, but there's still a sense of community.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah, so I think that now wraps up this week's episode. I can't believe we're already 14 weeks in to this
I know, it's
podcast.
crazy.
It's been a pretty awesome ride. I hope for everybody listening that we're getting better. We'd love to hear your guys' feedback, even if it's horrible, because I'm sure there should be or could be a lot of that. But anyways, we want to thank you guys for listening. This wraps up this week's episode about HSAs. We hope you guys liked the trivia, and we hope to see you guys next week in the neighborhood.